seen that there is oppression, and this brings on the siege and the taking away of sacrifices because God gets burdened by them. In Jeremiah chapter 6, we start to look at this idea of the siege itself. Okay. Again, it's pattern. It happened in Jeremiah's day. It's going to happen again at the end. It says, "Flee for safety, O sons of Benjamin, from the midst of Jerusalem." God calls his people, if you can escape, escape. Run. Don't stay there. Those who listen to Jesus, it will go well with them. Not well in terms of nothing bad happening, but you don't want to stay there. If you don't listen to Jesus, it's going to be huge repercussions. Because you're going to be there and desolated with everything. At least if you escape, you won't keep your things, but at least you'll keep your life. At least you keep your life. But if you're not willing to lose everything, you're not just going to lose everything, you'll also lose your life as well. There's a lesson there. If you're willing to leave everything behind, at least you'll keep your life. You'll lose everything, but at least you'll keep your life. But if you hold on to everything here, then you'll not only lose everything, you'll lose your life as well. And so here it says, blow a trumpet in Tekoa. The word blow there is the same, almost the same word as Tekoa. Blowing the trumpet, the shofar, is warning. Warning. The armies are coming. The siege is underway. They're coming to besiege us. Warning. Flee, flee. And so it says, raise a signal of the Beit HaKerem, for evil looks down from the north. This idea of looking down is not just like looking down like this, but looming over like this. It's scary. Evil is looming over from the north. Remember, we talked about the king of the north and the king of the south. The king of the north is the one who brings the abomination of desolation. Evil is looming from the north. And we're going to look at this in just a minute, this concept of the north. And great destruction. The comely and dainty one, the daughter of Zion, I will cut off. Shepherds and their flocks will come to her. Shepherds are kings. So Antichrist and some other kings are going to bring their armies and surround Jerusalem. They'll pitch their tents around her. They will pasture each in his place. So in other words, they're going to use, just as in any warfare, you use what's there. You feed yourself with what's there. If you take over a town, you use their resources for your people. You take their stuff for your people. So then it says, prepare war against her. Literally, sanctify or make holy war against her. The idea of them coming against Jerusalem, they're going to think that they are doing God's will. And in a sense, they're right. They are doing God's will. But it doesn't mean that they're on God's side. And that's the deception that they are in. Oh, because God has called us to do this, so God is on our side. No, he's just using you for a time to fulfill his purposes. But he will judge you for your evil as well. But the idea is holy war against Jerusalem. Does that ring any alarm bells? Arise and let us attack at noon. Woe to us, for the day declines and the shadows of the evening lengthen. In other words, let's get on with it. Arise, let us attack by night and destroy her palaces. For thus says the Lord of hosts, cut down her trees. A tree that gets cut down is a tree that bears no fruit. There's a picture here. Yes, it's literal trees casting up a siege, but the trees are a picture of people that do not bear fruit. Remember what John the Baptist said? He said, any tree that doesn't bear fruit, the axe is at the root. Any tree that does not bear fruit will be cut down. What speaks about these trees is a picture of what happens to the people. Cut down her trees and cast up a siege against Jerusalem. That is the city to be punished, in whose midst there is only oppression. There's only oppression. Jump to verse 22. Thus says the Lord, behold, a people is coming from the northland, and a great nation will be aroused from the remote parts of the earth. They seize bow and spear. They are cruel and have no mercy. Their voice roars like the sea, and they ride on horses, arrayed as a man for the battle against you, O daughter of Zion. We have heard the report of it. Our hands are limp. Anguish has seized us, pain as of a woman in childbirth. There's the woman in childbirth, ready for the birth of the child. It's the pain. Basically, it's saying the siege is like child labor pains, or woman's labor pains when she's having a child. Do not go out into the field. Do not walk on the road, for the enemy has a sword. Terror is on every side. In other words, get to a safe place and hide. Get to a safe place and hide. If you can escape, escape. But don't start walking in places where people can see you walking. Escape and hide yourself. Terror is on every side. O daughter of my people, put on sackcloth and roll in ashes. Mourn as for an only son, a lamentation most bitter. For suddenly the destroyer will come upon us. So this siege is like a woman in childbirth. They're going to war against God's people. And God's people are being told, you've got to hide and flee. It's going to be an awful time. But this army is coming from the north. And that's really important because we saw the Antichrist is the king of the north. Now there's something about that the Lord deposited that in my heart in 2001. And I had no idea of what it was about at that time. But I wrote this I think in 2002. I copied notes from my diary in 2001 of what God was showing me at different times that year. And on the 21st of June, I read Jeremiah 4 verse 6. And it says, for I am bringing evil from the north. And this is what I wrote. I don't know why or what it means, but it stood out. It almost jumped off the page. And I felt God was giving me that verse, but I had no idea of what it was about. It was just like, I just felt God wants me to pay attention to this. So let's go to Jeremiah chapter 4. Okay. And then it says this in verse 5. Declare in Judah and proclaim in Jerusalem and say, blow the trumpet in the land. That's the trumpet again. Warning, judgment's coming. Cry aloud and say, assemble yourselves, let us go into the fortified cities. You don't want to be in Jerusalem, but there's fortified cities. People are going to say, go to a place of safety. He says, lift up a standard towards Zion, seek refuge, do not stand still, for I am bringing evil from the north and great destruction. A lion has gone up from his thicket, and a destroyer of nations has set out. He's gone out from his place to make your land a waste. Your cities will be ruins without inhabitants. For this put on sackcloth, lament and wail. For the fierce anger of the Lord has not turned back from us. From this time till the end, desolations are appointed. The idea of desolating the land doesn't all happen at one time. It starts here, it ends here. Okay? So you have various coming against Israel here, possibly here, and definitely here. Possibly these two things happen at the same time. I don't know. I'm not going to confuse you because I haven't worked it out. But what I'm saying is, desolation begins here up to here. And so there's a process that happens with Israel. God does it by bringing evil from the north. In Jeremiah's day, this is how it happened. Babylon went, not in the north, they're not from up here. Syria's up here. Assyria's here, which is modern day northern Iran. What they called Persia. Not Syria, sorry, that's Persia. Sorry, Assyria's northern Iraq, around Mosul. So it's in the north. Syria's in the north. Those places are in the north. Babylon's down here, southern Iraq. So how come they get called the Northern Army, the King of the North? Because the way they worked, they started in southern Iraq, they went up to northern Iraq, went to Syria, moved down from there, or that region. They went up north and came down that way. So Babylon, they do this kind of action. They go up north and they come down. It struck me this year because I was listening to a guy called what's his name? I think his name is Jay Smith. Jay Smith, I think his name. He reaches out to Muslims. He debates Muslims in Hyde Corner in London. Muslims hate him, but he's witnessing to them and taking them on, and he loves them. Like he calls the Islamic extremists, he calls them my friends. You know, he has this guy. He says he's my friend, but he said, you know, when we take over, you're the first person I'm going to kill. Jay's like, cool, I can live with that. You know, it's like he's got this heart for Muslims. He wants to see them saved, but he attacks Islam head on. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He says Islam is a religion of war. It's a religion that takes over by war. What he said when I listened to him this year is there was a change in the Muslim world in the West. And that change happened 3 months after God gave me that verse. 21st of June, 3 months later, 21st of September, Twin Towers were hit. They came down, and there was a shift in the Muslim community. So now when that happened, there was this sense of being threatened, because now the West or people are going to turn against us. And so he said, what do they do when they feel threatened? They go back to the book and the man, the book and the man. They read the Quran in light of Muhammad's life and his example. Today, ISIS, all they're doing is following the book and the man, the book and the man. ISIS, where did they start? Southern Iraq. They took over places like Mosul. Now they're being taken out. They were into Syria. And in the future, they have their heart set on the armies of the Europeans, what they call the Crusaders, coming to meet them in Dabiq to overcome them, to fulfill Islamic prophecy as they read it. And they want to come for Israel. They are an army of the north. I'm not saying that they are Antichrist's army, Antichrist coming, but back then the Lord was showing me about Antichrist and about the armies that would come against Israel. If the Lord was warning me about something that was concerning September the 11th and concerning this ISIS thing, we could well expect, especially concerning the geography of end times events, Persia, Babylon, Assyria, you're talking about Iran and Iraq, Turkey, all these countries, they're all Muslim. Every single one of those countries are Muslim. It's possible Antichrist is going to come out of that world because those countries are Muslim today. If Jesus is coming back in our time, it would make sense. That's all I'm saying. That God is I believe God's allowing these things to come up. What is ISIS? ISIS is a kind of conqueror going out conquering and to conquer, to expand its empire. That's the kind of thing we're going to see with Antichrist's army. I'm not saying ISIS is Antichrist's army. I'm not saying Antichrist coming out of ISIS. I'm saying that ISIS is the kind of thing that ISIS is doing is the kind of thing that Antichrist is going to do. The king of the north is going to war against the king of the south to conquer territory, to expand empire. Isn't that what Rome did? Sent their armies up north to conquer territory, make their enemies pass under a yoke, to symbolize that Rome has defeated them. They're humiliated, they're like slaves to Rome. Isn't that what happened with Babylon? Any empire takes over by force, expands itself by force. This is the kind of thing. God is bringing evil from the north. As it happened in Jeremiah's day, it's going to happen in the time of the end. And wherever that north is, whether it's Iraq or Iran or Turkey or Syria, whoever the final northern king is, king of the north is, he's going to come against Israel. He's going to bring this. And God is going to allow him to do it. But here's a word of encouragement. One last word of encouragement.
After repeat.
Revelation 13, verse 10. Oh, let's go from verse 7. It was given to him, that's the beast, to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority over every tribe and people and language and nation was given to him. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. So if your name's not in the book of life, you'll end up worshipping him. And then it says, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is for captivity, to captivity he goes. If anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. The King James puts it differently. It says, if anyone is...
He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword.
Yeah, but yours is not King James, is it?
Yeah, but not the New King
New
James.
King James, yeah, but the King James puts it differently. It's almost like if you're destined for captivity, and if you're to be killed with the sword, you'll be killed with the sword. And it's almost like a fatalistic view of like, well, que sera, sera. But here in these translations, it puts a different picture. And the picture is this: if you lead into captivity, you'll be led into captivity. If you kill with the sword, you'll be killed with the sword. And that's why it says afterwards, here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints. In other words, this: whatever they do to you, God is going to do it to them. Whatever they do, they burn. Babylon will be involved, I'm sure, in this. Antichrist rides the beast. Oh no, sorry, the woman, Babylon, rides the beast. She rides on the back of Antichrist. And they're going to come against Jerusalem. But God is going to have Antichrist burn Babylon with fire. They're going to make Israel weak and as a nothing and want to annihilate. But it's the armies of Armageddon that are going to be annihilated. We will suffer a temporal fire, but they will suffer an eternal fire. So in other words, we have perseverance and faith because the issue of justice should not even be something we struggle with. God, this is so unjust. Because we should know that God is going to bring justice. And when his justice comes, it's going to be, you don't even want to be here when his justice falls. In fact, when his justice falls, with these bowls, 7 bowls of wrath, and he's in heaven, he goes into his temple, and the door of the temple is locked. Not even an angel can go in there. Because you would not stand if you were in that temple when God is pouring out his anger. He contains it. He shows forth his mercy in his anger and wrath. And he directs his wrath not to his people, but to his enemies. That is why, with Armageddon, they're brought to Israel from all the nations to separate them from the rest of the nations. To separate them from the rest of the nations and to bring them here so he deals with them once and for all and pours the wrath on them without pouring that final wrath on those who are left behind, who then repent and turn to the Lord at the end. God made an ark or he told Noah to build an ark so that when the floods came, Noah and his family were preserved. God said to Lot, even though God was under no obligation because there was not even 10 righteous in the city to save the city, God says to Lot, I cannot do anything until you've left. So we have to know that God is just. And God, whatever, if they lead you into captivity, they lead to Israel to captivity, they're going to go into captivity. If they kill with the sword, they're going to be killed with the sword. So God is going to make all things right. And in the end, it's going to be beautiful. Are there any questions about that? So let me just summarize what we looked at today, just to make it to its bare bones basics, okay? Oppression, and Israel in oppressing the righteous among them are going to think we're okay because we're doing all these sacrifices and we've got our temple and everything's fine. So on the one hand, they've got the sacrifices and the worship. On the other hand, they've got bloodshed because God regards that oppression as equal to murder. So therefore, the thing that they rejoice in, the sacrifices and the temple and all that, God's going to take it away. When the armies siege and Antichrist sets himself in the temple, he's going to stop sacrifice. This siege is going to be so terrible that if any of God's people are there, they need to remember Jesus' words. Because Jesus will allow them or make a way for them to escape, to come out. But when you come out, you run and don't, know that terror is all around on every side. And whatever you experience there, it means, let me put it this way. This that happens here happens because God sends an army of the north, Antichrist's army, against Israel. What we're seeing in the Muslim world today is a picture of what will happen at this time. As they're building their empire through murder and forced conversion, and that's what Antichrist is going to do. He's going to expand his empire through war. Second seal is war. He's going out to conquer. Comes in a time of peace and tranquility. Peace is going to be taken from the earth. It's going to turn to war. But those who remember Jesus' words, and wherever we are, because whatever happens in Israel may happen elsewhere. The same kind of thing. Christian turning against Christian. It's not just here. It's going to happen elsewhere. Escape. Escape. And Jesus will make a way of escape. Jesus says, when you see this happening, pray that you may have the power, the strength to escape all these things, and to stand before the Son of Man. So we pray for strength. And lastly, we know that whatever they do to us, whatever they do to Israel, when he's accomplished his purpose, he's going to repay it to them. God is a just God. There's nothing that you go through that God won't make right. And when he does make it right, you don't want to be here. Because when he makes it right, it's the most terrible thing. Like Israel and Egypt, God waited. 400 years, God waited, God waited. But when it came, those 12 plagues decimated them. Decimated the Egyptians. They were terrible. God is long-suffering. But when his judgment comes, you don't want to be under that judgment.